expediency and because I've promised David Stradling that he will be able to exit and go to another lecture commitment that he has later this afternoon, we'll go ahead and begin. I am not the Master of Ceremonies. That would be John McNay, who is yet to arrive. But as the Vice President of the Executive Council for the American Association of University Professors at the University of Cincinnati, I will assume the position of John McNay just for today. Wouldn't want to assume it permanently. But this is part of a film festival and an educational forum on labor history, which was organized by Andrea Kornblum and is intended to bring awareness both to SB 5, the state legislative bill, but also to put it within a larger historical context about charter schools, charter school legislation within the state of Ohio, and also the larger initiative by the American Legislative Executive Council, or ALEC, which is some of the controversy that Professor William Cronin became entangled in his blog, Scholar as Citizen. So, David Stradling, who studied with Professor Cronin at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, is going to take the first of our 15-minute segments to talk about Professor Cronin and about the controversy, the Cronin controversy, as I've learned to label it in my notes for the forum. And then we will move to various 15-minute presentations. So, thank you, David.
Thank you, Jen. I studied with Cronin in the early 90s, so I know him as a teacher. Obviously, I was attracted to the University of Wisconsin because I knew him as a scholar beforehand. I have since published 2 books with him in his book series and have another one in press, so I know him as an editor as well. Obviously, my opinions about Cronin are highly biased by this long relationship that I've had with him. And I want to kind of tell his story to set this in context so you get a sense of who he is. It's the part that's kind of missing. It's easy to follow what goes on in the blog because it's all there for you. But what's missing is the type of person that Cronin actually is, which does come through in his scholarship and his role as a mentor and teacher. Bill grew up in Wisconsin. His father was a professor of history and also the dean of the Arts and Sciences College at the University of Wisconsin. So Bill grew up very much steeped in this academic tradition. His father was a very good historian, died not that many years ago. Bill was encouraged to go to graduate school after graduating from the University of Wisconsin himself. He went to Yale, intending to study English history. But he took a graduate seminar with a man named Edmund Morgan, who was one of the finest scholars of colonial New England. In that seminar, Cronin wrote a paper that Morgan thought was so good that he encouraged Cronin to expand upon it, and that paper became Changes in the Land, which was Cronin's first book. Changes in the Land, I'm just going to talk a little bit about the scholarship as I go through. Changes in the Land, published in '93, was part of the creation of a new field of inquiry, a new way of thinking about the past, which is called environmental history. It was, along with a group of other books and a group of other scholars, it was revolutionary, really. And in fact, it was so groundbreaking that Cronin became, this is just after he's received his master's at Yale, mind you, becomes a Rhodes Scholar at Oxford, gets his DPhil, comes back to Yale, and is simultaneously an assistant professor and a doctoral student at Yale. He becomes a tenured associate professor at Yale while also pursuing his doctorate at Yale. I find this shocking. You seem completely okay with it, but I think it's ridiculous. His dissertation was basically word for word the book Nature's Metropolis about Chicago and its relationship with the American West. He publishes that book and becomes a full professor. He gets his doctorate and becomes a full professor basically in the same afternoon. This is a man with considerable talent, if you haven't gathered that already. Nature's Metropolis is also a remarkably groundbreaking book. When all of this controversy broke, and Paul Krugman referenced Nature's Metropolis in his column as this controversy peaked, I looked at Amazon to see where this book was. Mind you, it was published in '91. It is very unusual for a historical monograph of this heft. It's a huge book. To remain a big selling book for 20 years, which is what it is now. It was number 68 on Amazon's best-selling. And I think that in and of itself is Cronin's revenge for all of this. So Cronin helps establish the field of environmental history in part through his scholarship, but also in part because he trains so many graduate students. First at Yale, where he trains a number of very important scholars who've gone on to do their own important work, very much influenced by their relationship with him. And then he moved, and this speaks, I think, directly to Cronin's character. He moved to the University of Wisconsin. And again, you don't see this kind of move very often, somebody going from Yale, which, if you don't know, is widely regarded as the finest institution for the study of history in the United States, to Wisconsin, which has a great tradition in its Department of History. But he wanted to go back home to be near his family, but also, I think, maybe even more importantly, to be in Wisconsin, because he believed so strongly in that state, its tradition of progressive thinking, its tradition of public education, the seriousness with which it took all of these traditions. And it was something that I very much appreciated while I was at Wisconsin as well. This is a flagship university that takes its intellectual mission very seriously. He returned to Wisconsin, which is where I got to know him, and he has trained altogether roughly 40 doctoral students so far, which is to say those are the ones who have completed their dissertations and he directed them. Since then, he has also started a book series at the University of Washington Press in environmental history, and there he has edited and written the forwards to something like 30 books thus far. When you take all together the work that he has done himself, the students that he has trained at Yale and at Wisconsin, and those scholars whom he's influenced as an editor, it's pretty fair to say that he has been essentially the most important founder of a field, environmental history. Through all of it, it has been evident that Cronin takes the intellectual work of history seriously as well. He is famously open-minded. He asks questions of everybody. He listens to everybody. It's one of the things I learned about him as a teacher, that he had the ability to hear everybody in the room and to comment upon what it is that they said in a way that recognized that he heard what they said, and that in fact he could divine from what they said something of value, which at Wisconsin is a little bit easier to do than here. But still, it was something that I marveled at. That somebody who is almost always the smartest man in any room that he occupies, he had the ability to communicate with everybody in the room. That's how seriously he took the task of teaching. So all of this becomes a surprise to him when he writes a blog as the scholar as citizen, and does what historians do, asks questions about situations, investigates documents, tries to discern meaning from the written word, and to try to assign a sense of causality. And when he does this in a blog, in preparation for a New York Times op-ed piece, which appeared several days later, he is asked for, well, he indirectly asked for his emails through an open records search requested by the head of the Republican Party in the state of Wisconsin. I think it's fair to say that Bill was blindsided by this. Although he's no babe in the woods, I mean, he understands how politics works, but he was not, in fact, acting as a politician. He